You're listening to the Farmers Guardian podcast. Gin has massively increased in popularity over the past decade, with smaller distilleries driving new trends in the sector. Warner's Gin, a farm-based gin distillery, was at the forefront of this boom. Farmers Guardian is media partners with the Cultivate conference. I'm Alex Black, and ahead of the conference on May the 1st, I caught up with Tom Warner and Hillsgreen's Andy Venables. From rhubarb to raspberry and elderflower to lemon balm, Warner's has been combining great gin with tastes of the English countryside. I spoke to Tom about growing the business from 2012 to today, but first Andy told us about the importance of marketing for rural businesses.
I'm Andy Venables, Managing Director of Hillsgreen. So we're a digital marketing agency purely focused on helping the agricultural industry thrive. And back in 2020, we teamed up with my business partner, Simon Haley, to create the Cultivate conference, which I'd love to talk to you more about that this morning.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Tom Warner, founder of the Warner's Distillery, which we like to say is the world's leading farm-based distillery. And that's all done on my family farm, the village of Harrington in Northamptonshire, which is now the global epicenter for quality gin, because when we launched this business, we launched it with a mission to save the world from mediocre gin, is what we said at the time. But now it's mediocre drinks because we actually manufacture gin, rum, vodka, and non-alcoholic spirits. So we've got a whole spread of products coming off the farm. And we like to say that we're farm-born British spirits is what we're producing. And we focus on the flavours of the British countryside as well. And looking forward to talking to you guys.
Brilliant, cheers. So Andy, first of all, I suppose digital marketing and agriculture aren't always the most kind of natural combination. Just tell us a little bit about, your passion for both and how you combine the two.
Yeah, so I started life on the family dairy farm in Macclesfield, Cheshire. Still very much involved in that family farming business. Currently milking 350 cows, selling our milk to the co-op. But my career took me in a different path than your traditional farmer, I suppose. And I fell into marketing. I ended up working for the majority of my early career for a digital marketing agency in Manchester. And what really excited me about marketing is almost trying to get a message in front of an audience that they have a need or a want will actually generate a reaction, whether that is them to inquire about something or go online and buy the product. In 2016, there was the opportunity for me to get back involved in the family business. And I started looking at diversification and maybe we could go into glamping or a farm shop. And I kept coming back to this, almost agriculture being seen as the poor cousin when it comes to other industries. And really the fact that there was a lot of great businesses in agriculture, but needed a bit of help and support when it came to actually marketing and connecting with their customer. So whether I was working with farmers that are diversified or whether it was businesses trying to get their new product and service on farm, I started doing some marketing consultancy and it sort of grew from there. I suppose the farmers coming into the industry now have grown up with smartphones and the internet. So naturally, when they need something or want something, they go to Google or they're on social media. And Hillsgreen was set up with the whole focus on how do we help connect those businesses that have got a great product or service to help those farmers with the farmers itself. And I suppose the pandemic really just grew our business because agriculture had to start thinking differently and how did they use digital and the internet to connect with their customers.
Yeah, and I suppose traditionally maybe farming hasn't been the best at getting its message out there in the right way. Is that fair to say?
I think that's very fair to say. Like within agriculture, you have this really passionate industry. And I think it's actually bringing them together to have one voice to tell our story better to consumers. It's something that I've been very passionate about. I started a Mission for Milk campaign back in 2019 and then Mission Ag in 2021, where I wanted to try and bring the industry together to really shout about what we do. And I think if you look at the vegan movement, that's something they do very well. There's a group of passionate people, they've got an agenda and they're very clear on their message. And I think what I would love to do over my career in agriculture is to try and bring the sector together, to collaborate, to help get that message landing better with consumers.
And obviously, we're speaking ahead of the Cultivate conference. Just tell us a little bit about the conference, where it is, how farmers can get along, and what you'll be discussing.
Yeah, so Cultivate, as I said, we set it up in 2020. Having worked out of the sector, I had the privilege to go along to many business motivational speakers, and I really felt actually what I learned in those sorts of environments and conferences benefited me becoming a better leader. And I think coming into agriculture, whether it's the small family farm, these are now businesses where they're employing, in some cases, significant numbers of staff, and people are coming into the industry with no training or mentoring around how they can become a better leader. Because I think going back to that point around how do we connect better with consumers and actually champion agriculture, it comes from having better leaders in this industry. So that's where Cultivate was formed. The format is quite simple. We bring in some top business speakers to talk around leadership and development for those people that actually understand the importance of investing in themselves. So in the room, we have everyone from farmers to those businesses that are related to farming, whether it's consultants, nutritionists, vets, etc., but all see the importance of investing in themselves. So that's why we bring in speakers from outside the sector that are used to dealing with many of the global brands and helping them build better leaders, but also bringing in rural successful entrepreneurs like Tom, tell their story, their trials, their tribulations, their challenges that they've had in growing their business, and almost leave the event on a high in terms of, you know, feeling really motivated and inspired. And if they could leave with 2 or 3 different things that they could go in and implement their business tomorrow, then we've done our job and sort of played a small part in developing the leaders. So this year's conference takes place up at Heaton House Farm, which is a great wedding venue. Again, a farmer that was probably not really thriving. It came to their mixed farm 20 years ago, and they looked at an opportunity to diversify, and they have this great, you know, rural wedding venue. So it takes place on the 1st of May. And you know, we've still got a handful of tickets left. So those people that are looking to attend and invest in themselves and becoming a better leader, head to cultivateconference.co.uk and grab one of the last few tickets remaining.
Excellent. And Tom, you'll be talking at the event. So just take us back. I think you launched the gin business in 2012. Just take us back, I suppose, a little bit further about, you know, what you were doing at the time and why you decided to go into gin.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, what I'll be doing, Frank, I'll be doing my best not to ruin Andy's conference. That's what I'll be doing on the day. I'll make sure I don't let you down, Andy. It'll be good, entertaining stuff. But so I grew up on a farm, right? Growing up on a farm, I think it's a blessed experience. I always describe it as Enid Blyton meets slavery, because, you know, you're basically adventures around the English countryside, but you are free and available labour from the day you're born for the farm. Went off to agricultural college in Shropshire, Harper. Had a great time there. Finished off as SU president. And then whilst I was there, part of my course, you had to do a sandwich year out, which I ended up being in East Africa coffee buying for that, which was quite an adventure. And then I went into the produce industry, so dealing with farmers all around the world. So didn't go straight back to the family farm. Wanted to be involved in agriculture, wanted to be involved in farming and food, but do something a little bit different than just go straight back onto the family farm. And dealing with farmers all around the world, growing crops that we can't grow in the UK, everybody, it's the same language, same kindred spirit, same attitude. So as a farmer's son, it was, you know, duck to water kind of stuff dealing with these guys. So bananas, pineapples, oranges, you know, you name it, they're just crops, right? And brought those into the UK. And the other fun part of my job was dealing with the multiple retailers, the grocers, who, you know, my job was locking horns with the buyer weekly on price negotiation. That was all part of it. So did all of that. But after a decade of the produce industry, decided Well, actually, no, it's about 7 years. I did a decade, but about 3 years before leaving, started thinking about diversifying the family farm. So that was 2009. And that really took about 6 months of looking at lots of different business ideas. And the penultimate idea we looked at, and I'm always envious of people that just wake up and say, that's what I'm going to do. This was just an evolution of wanting to start something and looking at lots of different opportunities. And I advise anyone that wants to start their own thing to do that. There's no straight line journey with this stuff. So we looked at lots of different ideas. The penultimate idea was producing essential oils via distillation. So growing crops of lavender or rosemary, that kind of stuff on the farm, distilling and extracting the oils. The evolution of that was, what do you do with the still for the rest of the year? You can make booze. Why are we talking about flowers? Let's make booze was the evolution of that business idea. But little did we know we'd come completely full circle, because now I've converted 10% of the farm now to growing plants for distilling. So we've got 15 acres of botanicals that we manage now, which is probably made up of around 250,000 plants, 750 trees that we grow for flavour to go into those spirits, because, you know, our mission is make the tastiest drinks in the world. We know that everything that we grow home on the farm is actually better in terms of flavour, because we've used local academia and food science teams to actually analyse our farm-grown ingredients down to a molecular level. So we know that what we grow on the farm is tastier than anything that we can buy in, so why wouldn't we grow it? But it's also great for the planet, because we are, instead of importing ingredients from all over the world, we're actually creating biodiversity here in the UK, which is a hot topic, right? We all know carbon's a problem, we've got to deal with it. Biodiversity is arguably a bigger problem for the country right now. So creating an environment on our family farm, which is only going to go one way, hopefully, which will increase it over the years. We're creating a really rich environment for invertebrates, which then are supporting 5 internationally protected bird species that live on the farm as well. So, you know, the side effect of making gin is nature positivity, which is a big part of what we do for the brand. Gin came, you know, the evolution. One was, we're going to make spirits. The first business plan was gin, vodka, rum, tequila, brandy. You know, we didn't know anything about the industry. We had to tune in to what we could make, what ingredients we had at hand. You know, the hedgerows of the British countryside and everything that we can grow here have been our inspiration from day one. And that really led us to gin, because the other factor was we couldn't afford to age something. Like, if you think of the cash flows of a whiskey business, you have to raise millions before you can launch a business like that, because just the manufacture, you basically set up a manufacturing operation with no revenue for at least 3 years. So if you think about the cash flows of a business like that, and you've got to continually build up your stock in warehouse, difficult to do. So that left us with white spirits. Gin is obviously the most delicious and foodie spirit in the world. Vodka, quite possibly the most boring thing you can drink. It's literally just a drug used to make soft drinks alcoholic. Gin is for foodies. Gin, well, London Dry Gin was created by the British, and we exported it all around the world. So for all of those reasons, we decided to diversify the family farm. And at the time, we nearly stopped the business plan because we found out 2 other people were doing this. And that was in 2010, we found that out. We still launched in 2012 because we thought, okay, there's 2 others, we'll get on with it. We're up to about 850 in the UK now. So very different landscape through independent distilling. And we were part of the vanguard that sort of started that movement off.
And I suppose I'm remembering back to 2012, I was at university, so there was a lot of gin drunk at the time, but it had a big, you know, there was a big movement, you know, especially with all the flavoured gins, that they became so much more popular than they had been in previous years. So you must have hit the market at the right time there.
Oh, 100%. Well, listen, this is a bold statement to make, but I've always asked people to prove me wrong. There was no flavoured gin until Warner's launched. And that was a simple interaction. My mum came into the kitchen when we were developing our first London Dry. We call it Harrington Dry Gin. and she'd picked fresh elderflower from the farm, and it would have been summer 2012. We hadn't launched yet. We were developing our first recipe, and she had put fresh elderflower into a bottle of Gordon's. And we were like, Mum, what are you doing with Gordon's? And she was like, Tom, it's an experiment. But that small instance on our farm, summer 2012, adding additional flavour to an already distilled gin. Now, most flavoured gin is just literally flavourings, alcohol, water, sugar, send it down the bottling line. Everything we do on the farm is we distill one of the best London dry gins in the world first, then add natural British organic material to it after it's been distilled. And it was that day that my mum inspired that journey for us. So we launched our elderflower gin summer 2013. First flavoured gin in the category. It's what got us into Marks and Spencer's. It led us to make our rhubarb gin, which everybody now orders pink gins when they go into a bar. I like to remember that pink is a colour, not a flavour. But anyway, our rhubarb gin created that pink gin craze thing. But everything we do is natural. So our rhubarb gin has actually got rhubarb in it. A third of every bottle is rhubarb juice. Our elderflower gin, we have to make it 3 weeks every summer. We've got to make a year's supply because we only use fresh elderflower. Well, I think we're the only nutters that do this kind of thing, but we believe real tastes better.
Just tell us about some of those crops then that you're growing, for that flavour.
Yeah.
Just take us through a few of them that you're growing.
Yeah, so for all of our gins, we're self-sufficient in a crop called Angelica, which is a British native crop. We outsource the production of it, actually. It's not a particularly sexy crop to grow. Eastern Europe tends to produce most of the world's Angelica crop now, and it's primarily used for making Angelica oil. Super important ingredient in gin, though. When London dry gin was invented, the banks of the River Thames would have been covered in Angelica, and arguably it would have been the more dominant flavour profile in London dry when it was first invented. We grow it on our farm. It grows really well in British fields and soil and climate. And you have to plant it sort of 18 months ahead because it's year 2. Start of year 2 is when you're harvesting that crop. But it's part of what we call the holy ginity. So juniper, coriander, angelica, they're the 3 that you want in your gin. And we're self-sufficient in all the angelica. We grow a lot of lavender. That goes in our London dry gin. Lemon verbena, which is kind of only half hardy, so it's a bit of a problem in the British countryside. But we've got an insurance policy with a glass house that we rent down the road that if we get a bit of dieback in the winter, we can just fill in the spring. But those 3, it's why our London Dry, which is available in Sainsbury's and Tesco's right now, is absolutely beautiful because it's a walk through the British countryside and our farm. Angelica, that bright British native Hidcote blue lavender that we grow. It's not soapy like the French. It's actually fruity and jammy. So you get a fruity, jammy lavender note, some lemon verbena. But we actually grow elderflower. My dad's been trying to pull it out of hedges all of his life. We've got an elderflower orchard now. We actually grow dandelions because we roast the roots and turn it into a spiced rum. We grow chamomile. We grow raspberries, roses, rhubarb. Blackberries, you name it, a whole host of different crops are grown on the farm. We even managed to grow some Szechuan pepper, although I don't think it's going to be scalable. I think the next crop that we're going to try and scale is licorice, because that's done quite well in trials, so we're going to get some licorice in the ground as well. We also keep our own bees that pollinate all of this stuff, and then the great transaction there is we end up with honey that goes into one of our gins called Honeybee.
Excellent. Some interesting crops there. And going back to kind of the marketing thing, I know you have the experience of dealing with the retailers in your previous jobs, but how did you find, going out and marketing the gin once you'd created it?
Yeah, I mean, there's layers to that. It's all the 2 phrases. It's physical availability and mental availability are the 2 things that we're looking for with a brand. You've got to know about it to buy it, and you've got to be able to find it to buy it as well. So if you've got great availability and no one knows about it, it's going to be very difficult to sell it. And if you've got loads of if everybody knows about it but can't buy it anywhere, it's going to be very difficult to sell it. So that's the game that you're playing the whole time. I think arguably as a brand, we've probably got more physical availability than mental availability at the moment, for sure. If everybody in the UK overnight suddenly knew how awesome our brand was and how it's made, I don't think any other gin would be sold. But the game is, the big boys have control of all the marketing channels because they've got the margins to spend infinitely on sort of reaching the consumer. What we've got is quality and authenticity, so it's a much longer journey. But what it does mean is people want to stock us. So we've got some great distribution, and when you start, no one cares. You know, literally, I think that's one thing that everybody that starts a business needs to know. The world does not care about you. So you can't just sit there waiting for the phone to ring. You've literally got to get out there, grab people by the throat, kick down doors, get in the car. It's boot leather, car tires, up and down the country. And that's the game. So we Monday to Friday for us was, if we weren't distilling, we were out in London or Manchester or Leeds or Birmingham, going to visit bars or shops, or on the phone, just phoning people up. And at the weekends, we were at every food or drink event in the country, up and down the country, sort of banging the gong. Different now, a far more competitive environment because there's huge amount of additional distilleries out there. So the advantage now is everyone in the country understands craft distilling, because it wasn't an industry 10 years ago. When we launched, far less competitive, but every sales call took about 15 to 20 minutes of justifying that it wasn't going to kill someone. It was actually better than any of the stuff that the big boys were making. Yes, HMRC knew about it and the duty was paid, you know, all this kind of stuff, because it just wasn't understood, because it was only made by big corporate entities back then. So yeah, it's attritional is the short story, and it's definitely not easy for any small business to sort of find their niche in the world. And it is a large amount of never give up. You just got to keep in the game, marching forward every single day. And some days you're lucky, other days you're not. But just stay alive, and yeah, you'll make it in the end.
And if you could give some top tips to anybody who is maybe just setting out on their diversification, or I suppose a little bit further down the line, what would be the top tips that you would give to people?
I think it's really understand the consumer demand for what you're thinking of doing it in your area, and however you can do that through surveys, talking to people. Because if you've got a farm shop 100 metres down the road or half a mile down the road that's already excellent, and you're thinking of opening a farm shop, you're probably going to struggle, because the reality is all you're going to do is dilute the sale between two businesses that one business had. So I think it's really find the white space for the opportunity. Why are you genuinely different? Why is your service needed in the area, or why is it significantly different to anything else that people are offering? Why are you better? I think you've got to think about your value proposition. Are you doing this to sell lots of stuff at a very low margin, or are you doing this to sell a few things at a very high margin, and how can you justify that? So what type of business model do you want to run? And a big thing for me is always have a fire. And we didn't do this. We launched, I think I did a cash flow on sales forecast that went out about 3 years, but we didn't really build anything behind that. And for me, that felt quite advanced at the time. You know, well, that's what we're going to sell by month for the next sort of 3 to 4 years. And you then get into the white heat of running a business, and you're lost in the melee of it. Having a plan is super important, and being able to break that plan down into small chunks is super important. So we, about 2 years after we launched, we got a growth coach, which at the time it was European money. We got a guy from the Manufacturing Advisory Service, they were called. That's all been wound up now, but there's probably other things out there. And he made us look at where do we want to be in 5 years in terms of revenue, social media likes on each of the different channels, number of e-commerce customers, number of bottles we want to be selling, the revenue that we want to be generating as a business, number of countries we want to be selling in. So just 8 or 9 key markers 5 years out, and driven primarily by the top line revenue number and the volume number. You got to sell that much volume to make that much revenue. Cool, tick, tick. How's that going to be broken down by the different channels? Now, within drinks. There's two primary channels, which is the on-trade, so bars, hotels, restaurants, and the off-trade, which is any shop that sells a bottle. But you've also got e-commerce, you've got international, and have a target on all of this. And then you go, right, well, if that's year 5, that's what we need it to look like in year 5. What does year 4 look like? What does year 3 look like? What does year 2 look like? What does year 1 look like? And once you've got year 1, I would then advise everyone to read a book by a guy called Gino Wickman called Traction, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. Most entrepreneurs actually do a lot of this innately anyway, but it's really, once you've got that 1 year target, break it down into what am I doing for the next 90 days that gets me to where I need to get to do the next 90 days, to do the next 90 days. And breaking it all down into small sprints that are achievable, because it can be really overwhelming because you start a business and you could do everything. And I think being hyper focused with your efforts and doing it in those sprints is a really important thing to do. And I'm saying all this, you know, it's my wife is my business partner. She's far better at structure and process than me. I'm like Spirit. I'm Willy Wonka. She's Deborah Meaden, if we were going to add sort of personality types to it. I'm ADHD, dyslexic, big vision. I spot trends. I create products. I'm the spiritual leader for the business. I'm energy and passion and all of that kind of stuff. Tina is fantastic at organisation, process, making sure the team know exactly what they've got to do. So a lot of what I've just said is really what she's driven into the business as well, in terms of that entrepreneurial operating system. Because, you know, even if you're a one-man band, just having those steps, because running a business is exhausting as well. And I think if you haven't got that plan written down and those sprints, when you wake up, you're exhausted, you could do anything that day. It's knowing exactly where to point the laser beam to create the most value for you is super important.
So you were talking, Tom, about, you know, you've gone from gin to all the different spirits that you're now producing, plus the non-alcoholic spirits, which I think is another area that's had massive growth in recent years. Just tell us a little bit about where the business is now and what you're looking for the coming months and years.
So, you know, COVID, the last 3 years have been pretty horrific to operate in business over. I think, I don't know many people, unless they were selling PPE or in providing energy, that kind of stuff, that have had a good time over the last 3 years. So that's been pretty tricky for us to navigate. We're coming out the backside of that now, and actually things are starting to shape up quite exciting for the future. So we've diversified our range. We launched our non-alcoholics in 2020, September. And we like to say that they're nature's non-alcoholic spirits. What we're making is the most highly engineered water in the world, is the reality. The process and provenance and ingredient that goes into it, far harder to make than gin. But we're doing distillation. We're also doing macerations, and we're blending different ingredients, all of that together to create the non-alcoholic spirit. But actually, it's the fastest growing part of the business off a low base. And I think especially in younger generations, there is a much higher propensity for people to moderate their alcohol consumption, if not absolutely not drink at all. So this is future-proofing the business and being very authentic about it. We believe our non-alcs are the most authentic in the category. We try and grow as much of that ingredient on the farm as well. And we've just got a stat the other day in Green King, actually, that our pinkberry spritz, which is the non-alc pink, but it's one of the spirits that we produce, the only cocktail that sells more than it is Aperol Spritz, which is mind-blowing, right? So the number 2 selling cocktail is a non-alc in Green King pubs. So it's a really important part of the business. We've also sort of, because we're creation is the energy within the business, it's what we love to do. We launched the spice of the British countryside, our spiced botanical rum, which we are growing dandelions on the farm. And this is mad, but we worked out in 2019 that one of the only spices you can produce out of the British countryside is roasted dandelion root. So we grow dandelions, we roast them at a local coffee roasters, and we use that as a a botanical to make a fantastic spiced rum, which is sort of only just going live across the country at the moment, but it's an absolutely delicious spiced rum made with farm-born British ingredients. And we've also just launched a secondary brand, not that we had enough to do already, but we came up with a concept called Trash and Treasure. One person's trash is another person's treasure. And it's about taking food waste from the manufacturing industry in the UK. So we're taking pineapple and mango peels from a prepared fruit factory in Northamptonshire and turning it into a tropical rum. We're taking citrus peels from a juicing company in Kent, lemon peel, and making a really super lemony vodka. So that's a separate brand to Warner's, but it's all in support of our sort of sustainable credentials as a business and one for the future. And then the other element that we're driving at the moment is obviously international side of our business. This sounds more impressive than it is because all of this is quite small volume, but we export to 35 countries. The big one is US, where we've just gone live with a very big partner out there. So God knows what could happen. I think the problem that we sort of said at the start of this, which is physical and mental availability, I think we're going to have quite a lot of physical availability out there, but no one's going to know who we are. So that's the next challenge that we've got to face, and in a different country, across the pond, fun and games. So yeah, they're the kind of the big things that the big levers that we're pulling at the moment, and obviously just recovering from COVID and the last 12 months cost of living crisis, which has been a dramatic phase for the business.
And what does the team look like? You obviously mentioned yourself and your wife, but are there other members of the team?
Yeah, so there's including me and Tina, there's 32 in the business. A lot of those people, you can almost split it. Roughly a third of that is commercial, sales and marketing. Then there's a chunk of it which is sort of administration and finance. And then a big bulk of that is actually production and so distilling and blending and bottling. Because we do everything. So we distill and we bottle our own products.
And Andy, I wanted to come to you for your top tips after we'd had Tom's. You know, again, for people that are diversifying, maybe they've got a product ready to go, or maybe they're still in the planning stages. What would your top tips be for marketing that?
Yeah, well, I was smiling because I agreed wholeheartedly with Tom. And as much as it's very easy to say having a plan, but it's a lot simpler to say it than actually to do it and then deliver on it. Because as in the marketing business, we're going through those growing pains. We're currently a team of 12 and got ambitions to double in the next 3 years. And having a plan is key, and then breaking it down, but then delivering on it, and then adding people and clients into the mix present a few challenges. But I think just to tap into something else that Tom mentioned around like having, don't set up a farm shop when there's one down the road. What does the customer want? Do that research. I remember Jane Lane from the Westmoreland Group, T-Bay and Gloucester Services speaking at Cultivate a couple of years ago. And she said the story of when her father was told that the M6 was going to come through their farm. He saw it as an opportunity, not as a threat. And most of her childhood was spent going into service station car parks, counting the number of cars that were coming in, how many people went for the toilet and how many people had a coffee. And could they actually put a business plan together to capture an audience that is going to go so far north as T-Bay? Now, luckily, they obviously did their research and times changed and there was definitely a market for that product. But as much as you think, oh, this would be great on the farm, or we could do this, or I could do that, is there a need for it? So do your research. And then I think then following the next point is, can you get really passionate about it? Can you get as passionate about that business as Tom is about his business? Because really, it's flipping hard when you're starting off. And the doors that you've got to knock down, as Tom says, and the people that you've got to speak to get there. So you've really got to get passionate about it. And going back to my situation, there was probably an opportunity and a business or consumer need for almost a glamping diversification or a farm shop. But to be honest, I really couldn't get passionate about it. What I was really passionate about was the marketing and actually helping those businesses thrive through better marketing. And touch wood, that's why I believe our business has been successful, because one, I felt there was a business need, and two, I could really get passionate about it. And the third piece is, do the numbers stack up? So there's got to be a need, there's got to be passion, but the numbers have got to be there in order to make it viable. And I think if you've got those three things in place, you've got really good foundations to go on and grow a successful business.
And just finishing off, Andy, if we go back to Cultivate, obviously you're going to be able to hear more from Tom, but just tell us a little bit about some of the other speakers that you've got there as well.
Yeah, so our business motivational speaker is a guy called Paul McGee, nicknamed the Sumo Guy, which stands for Shut Up and Move On. And there is plenty of content online of Paul speaking. So if you want to get a flavour for what he's got to say for himself, we've got Jim Bloom, who's the founder of Warrendale Wagyu. Wagyu's become quite big within the livestock market in recent years. And he's got a really interesting story of how he took the family farm and different farming enterprises he went in before starting Wagyu. He's got also a very successful poultry business, but also what's next for the future in terms of looking at biogas. And just, yeah, Liv, the editor of the FG, is going to be interviewing him in sort of a fireside chat, just to understand a little bit more behind what's driving him and what's he learned along the way. And then we've got Sammy Kinghorn, who's a Paralympian, grew up on their family farm in Scotland and had a horrendous accident in her teenage years. And actually how she took the fact that something that was so devastating happened to her on farm and has turned it into this real success story in terms of going to the Paralympics and competing for GB. So we've got a real mix. There's that nice theme of rural and agriculture and bringing those people together. We're set for a sellout, which is 270 people, and having that buzz and that enthusiasm of people that really care so much about the industry is going to be great. But then having the likes of Tom and Jim and Sammy and Paul coming together from all different angles, it's set to be a really great event, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And the theme for this year is going to be around resilience. If we think about what's happening in farming and agriculture at the minute, we've got the reduction in BPS, we've got these, I suppose, new ways of working in terms of grants and the SFI and the focus on how do we become more sustainable and reduce our carbon footprint, and challenges that, our costs are going up, but yet consumers don't or aren't able to pay that. There's some big challenges coming within our sector, and we're staring them in the face right now. So how do we become more resilient as people, as leaders, as people within this industry that we care so passionately about? What can we do to almost build our armor in terms of building our resilience? So I'm hoping that through the theme of those speakers, people will have some real good take homes.
Well, yeah, and we had Sammy on the podcast actually last year for Farm Safety Week, which was, really interesting, really inspiring person, after what obviously happened to her on the farm. That's great. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. That's great. Hopefully people will be checking out Cultivate and getting those last few tickets. And the FG team will be there as well. So pop over and say hello to us as well. Thank you to Tom and Andy. And don't forget, if you want to get your tickets, visit cultivateconference.co.uk. But that's it for this week's episode of the Farmer's Guardian podcast. Make sure you are following us on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back with another episode on Friday. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye for now.